Before we left for break, we had just gotten done going over the cat command. And so we showed how the cat command can combine the content of one or more, or of two or more files, and can create a new file. We can also just use the cat command to display what's in an entire file. So super useful command, especially when working with RNA-seq data, because sequencing can be done on multiple different lanes for one sample, and then you would have to combine the sequence data from each lane together to create one raw sequence data file for a sample. And so I use cat quite often to do things like that. And then just point out, you could cat files that are in your current directory just with the file names. If you want to cat files that are not in your current directory, then you would be writing the explicit path to each file that you want to combine together. And then when you want to direct it to another file name, you use this caret. After you write your cat with all the files that you want to combine, you use this caret, and then you can add in the path to where you want to output that new file, and you have to make sure that you provide what you want that new file name to be. Any questions about the cat command? Does anyone want to see anything else done again? Okay, things are good. Okay, that brings us to our very last section of the Unix Intro Jupyter Notebook. So I know that we're a little bit behind schedule here, so right after we get done with this, I'll hand you guys over to Lauren, who will take you through the R intro notebook, but let's finish up this Unix one. And I think that we're going to save some time in going over the RNA-seq material, because I think all of you guys are biologists, so we'll probably be able to go through that a little bit faster, whereas the coding I know is new to many of you. So in this next section here, another super useful thing that I do in Unix is to assign variables, and we are going to be doing this when we process our RNA-seq data. So in most programming languages, including Unix, variables are used to store information. I know we went over variables a little bit in the lecture material yesterday, but just as a reminder, variables are named objects that are going to refer to data that's stored in memory. So in Unix, we can simply use the equal sign operator to assign information to a variable. And just as a reminder, as I went over in the lecture, it's super important to choose informative, memorable, and short variable names, and of course not to have any spaces in your variable names or any weird characters. So as an example here, in the next cell, we're going to use the variable ssdir to create a variable for the path to our solar system directory. So you guys can go ahead and run this code block. So what this is doing is it's just assigning this path, which is our path to our solar system folder, to that ssdir directory. And to make sure, I guess we just go down to the next frame. So to call the variable in Unix, so to find out what is stored in the variable that you create, you have to add a $sign in front of variable name, similar to what I showed you guys in the lecture. So in the cell below, we're going to print this ssdir variable that we just created up here using the echo command. I guess before I go any further, I should double check. Is there anyone not seeing in the bottom left corner? See how it says Python, Conda environment, GL4U, idle? Is there anyone that's not seeing that? See, I don't mean that your kernel's down. Okay, good. So hopefully this open on demand option is allowing all of us to maintain our instances. That's great. Okay, so now in this next cell here, we're going to use the call variable to find out what's stored in our ssdir variable. So to make sure that we did indeed assign this path to that ssdir variable. And so we're going to use that echo command that I went over a little bit yesterday. So again, echo just prints back anything that you tell it to print. And so I'm going to tell echo to print back this variable ssdir. And then keep in mind that in Unix, that $sign that comes just before your variable name is telling Unix that this is a variable that I'm calling. And so I'm going to go ahead and run that command. And you should see that when I tell echo to print out this variable, ssdir, I see what was stored in that variable. right? So that's just what I assigned that variable to. Any questions about that? Okay. So now that we created a variable to hold the path to our solar system folder, we no longer have to write out the path to our solar system folder. Now we could just use that variable in place of the path to the solar system folder. Whenever we want to navigate to it, copy things to it, move things in and out of it, we can now do so using that variable. So this is why it helps make things look a lot neater when you're coding and you have your paths to the locations that you need saved as variables. So in the next few cells, I'm going to have you guys do the following. First thing you're going to do is you're going to navigate to your solar system folder using the ssdir variable. And then you're going to print your working directory to see if you indeed successfully navigated to your solar system folder. And then you're going to run the command to list the contents of your solar system folder. So again, 3 commands. I want you to navigate to your solar system folder using the ssdir variable that we just created. Then I want you to print your working directory to see if you did indeed navigate to your solar system folder. And then I want you to list everything in your solar system folder. So I'm looking for 3 commands. I'm going to set this up as a poll for you guys to tell me what those commands are. Okay. So you guys should all see the polls now. And I'm looking for 3 commands to navigate to your solar system directory using the variable for the solar system directory, to print your working directory once you do that, and then to list the contents of your solar system folder. So go ahead and copy and paste those commands into the poll and then hit submit. So waiting on a few more of you to fill in that poll question. Just have 1 or 2 more of you, so give another few seconds. You guys can copy and paste your 3 commands. Okay, looks like I have everyone. Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. Take a look. We're working on a way, guys, so that way we can start showing you more easily what everyone's answer is without indicating who put what answer. So hopefully starting tomorrow, we'll be able to do that. All right, so I got, yeah. Someone keeps getting an error. Okay, so mix of responses. So one of the first things we're going to be navigating. So in order to navigate, we use the cd command, which stands for change directory, right? So we want to change directory. So we're still going to be using our cd command. And keep in mind that the cd command is unique in Jupyter in that it has to start with a % sign instead of an exclamation point. So I think someone had an exclamation point there. So we want to do %cd to tell the system that we want to change directory. And we want to go to the solar system folder, but we just set up this nice nifty variable to store the path to the solar system folder. So rather than writing out the path, we're going to just use that variable, keeping in mind that in Unix, we have to make sure that we put a $sign in front of the variable name. That tells Unix that this is a variable. So we want to make sure that that's included in front there. So that would be the first one. That's how we're going to CD into the solar system folder using the SSDIR variable that we just came up with. And I know that in Jupyter, CD does tell you where you are. Again, that's not the case when you're just on a terminal. So the next question I had was to print your working directory. And it looks like you guys got that one right for the most part. So I think you guys are getting more comfortable with this pwd command, stands for print working directory. So again, starting with the exclamation point, followed by pwd. And that tells us that indeed we are in our solar system directory. Yeah, someone got an error and realized that it was a capitalization error. Yeah, so anytime you guys run into an error, the first thing you want to check is syntax. So you want to check to make sure that all your caps are right, all your lower cases are right, you didn't accidentally put a space in there. When you shit enough, that is almost always the issue. And you will hear horror stories from coders that have spent hours, sometimes even days, trying to figure out why their code isn't working to just learn that they had a typo. So it's pretty common at any level of coding to have those issues. And so now that we know that we're successfully in our solar system folder, the last thing here was to list the content. So it looks like you guys are all pretty comfortable with that ls command too. Yeah, so just running ls, now that we know that we're in our solar system folder, will allow us to list what's in there. And so we have the saturn.txt file that we had put in there. And then for those of you guys that followed along when we were playing with the cat command, you may also have this exsm.txt file. Any questions about setting up the variables in Unix? This is something that we are going to be doing well, we're going to be running quite a few of these commands in the RNAseq portion of the hands-on content. Okay, good. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward in Unix because you could just do the equal sign and then put what you want it to be stored as. So just a note here, important note, the variables that you create are stored in memory. So they are temporary and they're only going to exist for your current Jupyter notebook, which means that when you log out of the system, those variables that you had created will be wiped away from memory. So when you sign on again, you won't be able to use those same shortcuts that you made or the variable names that you made in your previous session. You'll have to recreate them. There is a way to set up variables in your system to make them permanent for you as a user. I'm not going to get into that. That's a little above and beyond the scope here. But yeah, so keep in mind any variables that you create are going to be wiped from memory when you change instances. This is going to be important when we're running the RNAseq Jupyter notebooks because we will need to store variables, and you'll notice that every time we start a new session on a new day, we will have to rerun those variables to make sure that we have them all stored in memory. So now that you've been introduced to some of the most common Unix commands, I want you to use the next several cells to kind of play around with those commands and answer the following questions. So I'm going to prop these up one at a time. The first question I'm going to ask you is, can you open up a directory with the cat command? So I want you guys to use these cells down here, add more cells if you like. Play around with that cat command and answer the question, can you open up a directory with the cat command? I'm going to put this up as a poll and have you guys answer. Okay, I went ahead and opened the poll. So I want you guys to play around with that cat command and answer the question, can you open up a directory with the cat command? Yeah, of course. Is this far enough? Okay, great. So go ahead and answer that question if you can open up a directory with the cat command. Waiting on a few more of you. I think I got just one more waiting on. Answer that question. Give you a few more seconds. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. Let me take a look. I got a mix. So most of you put no. Some said you can't seem to find a way. Some said that it gives a directory, and some say yes. So how do we test that? Well, we just made a variable for a directory, right? So we just made this ssdir variable, which is the variable that holds the path to the solar system directory, right? So one simple way to test this would be to see if we can run cat on this variable, because this would be having us open up a directory, since that variable is storing a path to a directory. So let's try that first. And what do we get? So the cat command actually tells us that what we just tried to open up is a directory. So it didn't actually open anything for us. It just told us that it's a directory. And so you cannot open a directory with the cat command. And so some other things that you could have tried to test this, we know that there's a nice shortcut to our home directory with the tilde, so we could have tried that. And we're going to see the same thing, that path there is a directory. We could have tried using an explicit path to a directory if we wanted to. So I'll use the explicit path to the solar system directory, and it will tell us that it's a directory. Yeah, so we actually can't use the cat command to open a directory. So I got another question here for you guys. What happens if you rename a file to a file name that's already in use in the same directory? So I'm going to bring this up as a poll question as well. Okay, so you guys can go ahead and put your answers into the poll question here. So what happens if you rename a file to a file name that's already in use in the same directory? Go ahead and type in your responses about what happens if you try to rename a file to a file name that's already in use in the same directory. And go ahead and give it a try to see what does actually happen. We'll do it together in a minute. So I'm waiting still on just one more person to answer. Give another few seconds. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close this poll. Okay, let me take a look at these results. God, it's not going to work as planned. It overwrites the file. The file that already exists is overwritten. Doesn't allow you to rename that file. It'll overwrite. The file that initially had the name has been lost to the ether. Yeah, it's not going to work out as planned. Some of you guys note that you get the same file, overwrites an existing one, overwrites file in use. Yeah, So it's going to overwrite the file. I know that let's take a look at the files that we have with ls. So in here we have Saturn and exsm.txt. So I'm in the solar system directory right now. So I'm going to go ahead and add another thing in here, and I am going to, so you guys remember when we tried to rename a file, so what command do we use to rename a file? Put it in the chat. What's the command that we use to rename a file? Yeah, so I'm getting some mixed responsive, some CP, some move. So the CP command is to copy a file, and the MV command is what we can use to rename a file. So what I first want to do here is let's take a look at the contents of these two files using cat. So you remember our Saturn.txt file has this fun fact about the International Space Station. And now let's take a look at what this exsm file has. So this file has a combination of, if you remember, that was the Saturn.txt and then the example.txt and then the Mars.txt that we combined together. So as you guys noted from the example above, and some of you put in your answer, if I were to move a file named Saturn.txt, right, which we know already exists in here, but I rename it to the same thing, at least in Jupyter Notebook, I don't think this is the same in Unix, I will get a note that they're the same file. So I think that this is what some of you guys had written. But what happens if I want to rename my Saturn.txt file to the name of the other file in there that already exists? So I'm going to move my Saturn.txt file and I'm going to name it the same as another file in there that exists. So I'm going to go ahead and run that. And so it allowed me to run it. And then when I run ls, I now only see one file here, right? Because I renamed my Saturn.txt file. So that should no longer exist because I renamed it, and I renamed it to the name of a file that already did exist in there, exsm. But now let's see what that exsm file that I just renamed my Saturn.txt file looks like now. So we're going to use the cat command to do that. And keep in mind that before we renamed Saturn.txt to exsm.txt, that exsm.txt file looked like this. So this is what was inside that file originally. And now when we moved our Saturn.txt file to rename it to the same name as that file that already existed, what we did is we just overwrote that file. And so now that file no longer contains what it did originally. Instead, it contains what that Saturn.txt file contained originally because we overwrote it with this move command. So it's going to overwrite the file. So when you rename a file to a file name that already exists, it'll rewrite that file name that already exists. Yeah. Is that good? How far did you want me to scroll? More? More. Is that good? More? Good? Okay. Let me know when you're good. Any questions about that? Because that's really important and we really want to make sure that we're cognizant of that so that way you're not overwriting your files. Because keep in mind when we're doing things like this on a command line, there is no recovery function. So there's no way to bring back the file that you've overwritten. And for those of us who do coding and things on the command line, I'm sure we all have stories about when we accidentally overwrote files. All right, awesome. So our next command, or our next question is what happens if you rename a file to a file name that's already in use in the same directory, but when you rename the file, you also move it to a different directory. So you're gonna rename a file that's in use in a directory, and you're gonna rename it to a file name that already exists in that directory, but when you rename it, you're gonna rename it and also move it to a different directory. So I want to know what happens here. So I'm going to open this up as a polling question, and I want you guys to play around with these commands to answer this question. Okay, I just opened up the poll. So go ahead and write your answers. So I'll give you some time. I want you guys to play around with this. A little bit more time. I want to see you guys all answering this question. So you guys can play around with this with the files that you have, and then let me know your answer. I'm going to give a few more seconds. Hopefully you guys will be able to at least put in a guess. I have a few more of you still need to answer, so you guys can put in your answers and then hit submit, and we'll go over it together. Okay, give about 20 more seconds. Okay, let's take a look at what you guys put. You have, it would make the file in the directory you specified, duplicates the file into the specified directory. We've renamed the file, then it will work. I do not understand the question. Could we use move current file ~/new folder? You could, but you'd have to change some spacing. If I understand the process, you have two files with the same name but different content in two directories. It will copy the file to a new directory that will have the same name as the file in the original directory. Okay, so mixed bag of responses. So what I want to know, I'm going to set some things up here because I moved some things around. So the first thing I want to do is I am going to see where I'm at. So I'm currently in my solar system folder, and I'm going to see what files. So I have this exsm.txt file. So currently I'm going to make a copy of this file. Actually, all right, I'm going to change the name of this file. I just want to set up so I can show you guys what will happen here. So the reason I'm changing the name is because I want to move it into my home directory, but I already have that file in my home directory, and so I want to make sure that I don't have that file name in my home directory. Do this. and then I'm going to ls. Okay, and now I have this copy file. And so I also am going to copy that file and name it something like test.txt. Okay. Okay. So now, guys here, yes, doesn't make new file, specify directory. It's not moving the file, but making a new file. So, a couple of things. Remember, the move command does not make new files. So the move command simply either renames a file if you're doing it within the same directory, or it can move the file to a new directory or a new location. And so if you guys remember when we moved the mars.txt file from our solar system folder to our home directory, it was no longer in our solar system folder. So it didn't make a copy, it just moved it entirely. So if you were to want to make a copy of a file and have that copy be somewhere else, but still maintain the original copy, then you'd use the cp command. So what I'm asking here is if you move a file, right? So the question is here is what happens if you rename a file to a file name that's already in use in the same directory, but when you rename the file, you also move it to a different directory. And so right now in my current directory, my solar system directory, I have the files exsmcopy and I have the file test.txt. And so what I want to do is I'm going to rename my test.txt file and I'm going to name it to exsm_copy.txt. Now that file already exists in this directory. So when I rename it, instead of just renaming it, I'm actually going to move it into my home directory. And so there's a few different ways that you can do that. You can use your shortcuts for your home directory. I know that the home directory is one level up from my current directory. And so I could do that. So I am going to go ahead and use the move command. Remember, using the move command, because we're going to move this or rename it. We're actually going to do both here. So I'm going to move my test.txt. And I want to rename it the same name of a file that already exists in my current directory. But instead of renaming it in the same directory, which this is what I would do here, that's something that we did earlier with the Saturn.txt file. But instead of renaming it, moving it to the current directory just with a different name, I am going to move it up one directory to my home directory and rename it exsmcopy.txt. So I'm moving this test file into my home directory or one directory up from where I currently am, and I am naming it exsmcopy.txt. So now when I go ahead and run that, first thing I want to do is see what's happening now in my current directory. So you'll notice that I no longer have that test.txt file in here, right? Because remember, I moved that file. So once you move a file from your current directory to another directory location, it should no longer be in your current directory. So we don't see it exist anymore in our current directory. And so now what I want to do is I want to see, did I actually move it up one directory into my home directory? So now I want to ls into my home directory, so I can either use tilde or I can use .docs. I know it's one directory up, so I'm going to do that and run it. And now if you look in here, I see that file exsm_copy.txt. Notice that I don't see a file called test.txt. It's because I moved my test.txt file into my home directory, and in the process of moving it, I also changed the name of it. So now just to show you, if I were to have a test.txt file in my current directory again, so right now I just have this file exsmcopy.txt. So I'm actually going to make a copy of that with the cp command, and I'm going to name my copy test.txt. So now when I run ls, I see that I have these two files again now in here. And this time I'm going to move my test.txt file again but I'm not going to change the name. So I'm going to move it to my home directory, but I'm not going to change the name. And if we look what's in our home directory, the first thing we want to do is make sure that there isn't a file called test.txt there, or else we would overwrite it. So we don't see any file called test.txt in our home directory, which is one directory up from where we currently are. And so now I'm going to run this move command again, and I'm going to move this test.txt file, except this time I'm just going to move it. I'm not going to tell it a different name. I'm just going to say move this file here, move it to the destination that's one directory up from where it currently is. And note that I don't have any additional naming information of the file, just the directory location. And so I'm going to go ahead and run that. And now when I run ls, I see here that my test.txt file is gone, right, as we expect, because I moved it to a new location. Where did I move it? I moved it one directory up or into my home location. So I'm going to ls my home location. And what you'll see is that now I indeed have that test.txt file there, and the name has not changed because I didn't tell it a new name for the file in my move command. Any questions about that? Anything you guys want to see again? So remember, the move command does not create new files. It simply moves files around, and or it can rename files. So it can move and rename at the same time. It can just rename if you're staying in the same directory with that move command, or it can just move if you don't give it a new name for the new location where you move it to. Any questions about that MV command? Hopefully it's a little clearer now. I do have just one more question to close out this portion of the, to close out our first Jupyter Notebook here. And my question here is, what are the options for the cat command? So I want you guys to pull up your cat help menu, and I want you to copy and paste the section of the menu that is the options into the poll that I'm about to open. So I want you to pull up that cat help menu and copy and paste just the section of the help menu that shows the options. And this will be the last question before you can stop listening to me talk and hear someone else talk. So I just opened the poll. So again, go ahead and open up the cat help menu and then copy and paste the options from that help menu. And click submit. I think I'm waiting on just a couple more. Go ahead and submit your responses. All right, get 20 more seconds. Okay, poll should be closed now. Take a look at your results. So I see a lot of right answers. I see a couple where people just copied the whole help menu. So yeah, I think a lot of you guys got this right. So this is probably one of the most important things to know about commands in Unix, because you're not going to memorize what all the options are for every command. Is so knowing that for any command, we can just run the command name followed by a space and then --help or -h, depending on how the developers wrote the program, to pull up a help menu. And so when you run this help menu has a few different sections to it. It tells you how to use the command, which is this usage. It tells you what the command does. So here it's telling you that it concatenates the files and puts them to standard out. And then it also tells you that if there's no file, when file is nothing, it reads as standard input. So you don't actually have to provide a file. It'll assume that you have a standard input there. And then after that, it shows the list of all the options. So it's this part of the help command that displays all the possible options for the cat function. And so again, options are here on the left. What those options do are listed on the right. And so this was the section I was looking for to answer the question of what are the options for the cat command. And then just to follow up, continue with this help menu, the next thing that it does is that some of them will provide examples of how to run the command. And then you usually get a couple of links to additional information. That concludes our Intro to Unix Jupyter Notebook. Again, I know that coding and command line work is super new to most of you. This stuff is not easy to pick up in a day or two. It takes a lot of practice and playing around with things. So I hope that you guys at least have the tools to know how to play around things and hopefully know enough to be able to show your students how to use these tools. And we will, hopefully at the end of today, or if not first thing tomorrow, have a couple hours to debrief about these intro notebooks, this one and the one that Lauren's going to be going over with you. So that way, if there's anything else that we can add to these notebooks or that you guys want to add to these notebooks to make it easier for you to teach this at your home institutions, we'll go over all of that during the debrief section. But before I hand it over to Lauren, are there any other questions about anything we went over in the Intro to Unix Jupyter Notebook? Anything that you want to see again? Okay, so just before I hand it over, I want to show you guys quickly. So to save all of the outputs that you have, you can click this icon of a floppy disk to save your Jupyter notebooks. If you want to export your completed Jupyter notebooks, you go to File, Save and Export Notebook As, and then you want to export it as an HTML, and that will prompt you to save it somewhere in your local cluster. And you will be able to save, and when you do save it, when you pull it up, it'll pull up in a web browser because it's an HTML file. It'll look like this, and as you scroll down, you can see that it has all of the outputs for everything that you ran throughout the whole thing. So if you guys want to save your notebooks with the outputs, that's how you do it. The other thing I want to show you, and don't do this unless you're ready to, but you can also clear all of your outputs, so that way you can run this again from start to finish. And so as you see right now, all of my outputs are displayed here. And so after you've saved and exported, Alba, I think you just sent that to me and not the whole group, but Alba just sent a message in the chat saying, final poll question, have you ever used a floppy disk? Yeah, so.
I want to know the answer. How many have?
I'll set up a poll question. I'll make it set up so that we could see all the answers too. Here we go. All right, let me add a question.
They really need to change the icon for the save button because soon there will be people that have no idea what that is.
Oh my God, I know, right? Okay, I just opened the poll. You guys can go ahead and answer that question for Alba. This is the fastest responses you guys have given the whole time. I think we got one more that needs to answer, although I think Ty might have had to leave early. Oh, no, cool. Okay, let's pull. So you guys should all see the poll answers. Wow, only 64% have used it. So
That's pretty cool.
I assume it's all the grad students. Probably haven't used floppy disks. Everyone knows what one is, though. That's good. Yeah, back in the day. Oh my God. You remember when they would have like, oh, I could store a megabyte on this floppy disk.
I know. Now we need to find out who's ever used the slide rule.
Ooh. I've used one, but only in like a museum context of old things that people use for education. Um, so yeah, so go ahead and save again, file, export, save and export notebook as HTML, and then pick a location. Once you've saved it, if you're ready, if you were to want to go through all of this again from start to finish, which I highly recommend, especially before you're ready to teach this in your classes, you can go to Kernel and you can go to restart kernel and clear all outputs. When you click this, it will get rid of all of your outputs in your notebook and you will not be able to recover them until you go through the notebook again. So all the outputs that you have will be wiped clean when you press this, so clear warning. But when you are ready, when you have all your original ones saved, you can click restart kernel and clear all outputs. It'll ask you if you want to restart the current kernel. It'll remind you that all of your variables will also be lost. And so you can go ahead and press restart. And now when you scroll down, you'll notice that this is back to the original, what it looked like before. We don't have any outputs anymore. So then you can start and run this from start to finish from scratch. Okay, that is the end of the Unix Intro Jupyter Notebook. If no one, yeah, I remember when 8 gigs was mind-blowing too. 8 gigs would hold maybe the data from one, maybe two sequence files if you're lucky. So just one sample worth of sequence data for RNAseq. Okay, now that we are done with our intro to Unix, I'm going to stop talking and hand it off to Lauren to bring us all into the R Jupyter Notebook. And so Lauren, you'll have about 20 minutes before lunch.
Okay.